The autumn wind rustled through the trees of Millbrook, a quaint market town nestled in the rolling hills of the English countryside. Thomas Blackwood stood at his father's study window, his tailored suit a stark contrast to the worn leather chair where his father had spent countless hours managing the family business. At 40, Thomas had already proven himself a shrewd businessman, transforming Blackwood Industries from a modest agricultural supplier into a regional powerhouse. His brother Oliver's battered Volkswagen pulled into the graveled driveway, its faded blue paint a testament to its owner's indifference to material wealth. At 35, Oliver taught art at the local comprehensive school, his passion for creativity and education earning him the affection of his students but little in the way of financial success. "You're late," Thomas remarked as Oliver entered the study, his casual attire drawing a disapproving glance from Mr. E. Henderson, the family solicitor. "Some of us still have to work, Thomas," Oliver replied, running a hand through his disheveled brown hair. "Not all of us can drop everything at a moment's notice." The tension between the brothers was palpable as Mr. Henderson cleared his throat and adjusted his wire-rimmed glasses. "Gentlemen, shall we proceed with the reading of your father's will?" The brothers sat on opposite sides of the massive oak desk, their father's empty chair between them, a poignant reminder of their loss. Mr. Henderson began reading the document, his measured tone doing little to soften the shocking revelations within. "To my eldest son, Thomas Blackwood, I leave 80% of Blackwood Industries shares along with the family estate and all associated properties in Millbrook and London." Thomas's thin smile grew as the list continued. Oliver sat silently, his expression unreadable as the solicitor detailed his brother's inheritance. When Mr. Henderson finally turned to Oliver's portion, the younger Blackwood leaned forward slightly. "And to my younger son, Oliver Blackwood, I leave my prized pig Augustus, currently residing at the Millbrook farm property." The silence that followed was deafening. Oliver blinked several times, certain he had misheard. "I'm sorry, what? A pig?" Thomas's laughter filled the study. "Father left you a pig? Oh, this is perfect." Mr. Henderson shuffled his papers uncomfortably. "There are some additional documents regarding the care and maintenance of Augustus, along with specific instructions about—" "This can't be right," Oliver interrupted, rising from his chair. "There must be some mistake." "The will is quite clear, Mr. Blackwood," the solicitor replied. "Your father was very specific about these arrangements." Thomas stood, straightening his jacket with a smirk. "Well, little brother, it seems father finally recognized which of us truly deserved to carry on the family legacy. Though I must say, leaving you a pig is rather fitting. You've always been more comfortable wallowing in mediocrity." Oliver's hands clenched into fists, but before he could respond, a gentle knock at the study door drew their attention. Emma Watson, Oliver's girlfriend of 2 years, stepped into the room. Her presence seemed to calm the mounting tension, though her concerned expression suggested she had overheard more than enough. "Ollie, are you ready to go?" she asked softly, her kind eyes taking in the scene before her. Thomas snorted. "Oh yes, do run along with your schoolteacher girlfriend. I'm sure you have finger paintings to grade or some other equally important task to attend to." Emma stepped forward, her usual gentle demeanor hardening. "At least Oliver makes a difference in people's lives, Thomas. What do you do besides count money and look down on others?" "I build things, Miss Watson. I create jobs, generate wealth, continue our father's legacy, something my dear brother seems incapable of understanding." Oliver moved toward Emma, placing a hand on her shoulder. "Let's go. There's nothing left for us here." As they walked toward the door, Thomas called after them. "Don't forget to collect your inheritance, brother. Augustus will be expecting his new master, though I dare say he might be disappointed to find himself in the care of such a failure." Oliver paused at the threshold, but didn't turn around. Emma's hand found his, squeezing gently, and together they walked out of the study, leaving Thomas to his victory and Mr. Henderson to his uncomfortable shuffling of papers. The drive home was silent, the English countryside passing by in a blur of autumn colors. Emma occasionally glanced at Oliver, who stared straight ahead, his jaw set in a firm line. It wasn't until they pulled up to their modest cottage on the outskirts of town that he finally spoke. "A pig," he said quietly, a hint of disbelief still in his voice. "My father left me a pig." Emma turned off the engine and turned to face him. "Your father was many things, Ollie, but he was never cruel without reason. There must be more to this than we understand. Oliver looked at her, his expression softening slightly. How do you always manage to find hope in everything? Because hope is what changes things, she replied, reaching over to touch his cheek. And maybe, just maybe, this pig is more than just a pig. As the evening light faded over Millbrook, Oliver and Emma sat in their small garden, planning their next move. The inheritance might have seemed like a joke to Thomas, but Emma's words had planted a seed in Oliver's mind. His father had always been deliberate in his actions, always thinking several steps ahead. Perhaps this unexpected inheritance was indeed more than it appeared to be. The following morning dawned crisp and clear over Millbrook Farm, the early sunlight casting long shadows across the dew-covered fields. Oliver and Emma stood before the pig pen, studying Augustus with newfound interest. The animal was unlike any pig Oliver had seen before, larger than average, with a distinctive black and white coat that seemed almost regal in the morning light. "He's beautiful," Emma whispered, leaning against the fence. Augustus approached them with surprising grace, his intelligent eyes studying the pair with what seemed like genuine curiosity. "He's different from the other pigs," Oliver noted, reaching down to scratch behind the animal's ears. Augustus leaned into the touch, emanating contentment. "Look at his markings, his build. Father always had an eye for quality breeding stock." Emma pulled out a thick envelope from her bag, the care instructions Mr. Henderson had given them the previous day. "These aren't just care instructions, Ollie. Look at this." Inside the envelope, they found detailed notes about Augustus's lineage, dietary requirements, and most importantly, a comprehensive business plan for sustainable pig farming. Oliver's father had meticulously outlined everything from organic feed formulations to waste management systems. "This is incredible," Oliver murmured, flipping through the pages. "Father wasn't just giving me a pig, he was giving me a foundation for something bigger." Emma's eyes lit up with excitement. "The old Matthews property next door has been for sale for months. It's not much, but with my savings and what we could get from the bank—" "Are you suggesting what I think you're suggesting?" Oliver asked, a smile tugging at his lips for the first time since the will reading. "Why not? You've always talked about wanting to make a difference, about finding a way to combine your love of teaching with something meaningful. This could be it. A sustainable farm that could educate people about ethical farming practices." Oliver looked at Augustus, who seemed to be watching their conversation with interest. "It would take everything we have, Emma. The risk would be enormous." "Sometimes the biggest risks bring the greatest rewards," she replied, taking his hand. "Besides, I've always wanted to trade my classroom for something a bit more adventurous." Their conversation was interrupted by the sound of expensive tires on gravel. Thomas's black Range Rover pulled up to the farm entrance, and he stepped out, looking decidedly out of place in his designer suit. "Well, well," he called out, walking toward them with a predatory smile. "Come to collect your prize pig? I must say it's rather amusing seeing you two out here playing farmer." "What do you want, Thomas?" Oliver asked, unconsciously stepping between his brother and Augustus. "Just checking to see if you've come to your senses yet. I'm willing to buy the pig from you. Let's say £5,000. More than generous considering its market value." Emma stepped forward. "Augustus isn't for sale." Thomas raised an eyebrow. "Augustus? You've named it? How quaint. Listen, Oliver, this is a business decision. What are you going to do with a pig? Keep it as a pet? Start a petting zoo, perhaps?" "Actually," Oliver replied, straightening his shoulders, "we're going to start a sustainable farming operation. Father left detailed plans and Emma and I are going to make them a reality." Thomas's laughter echoed across the farm. "You? A farmer? Don't be ridiculous. You can barely keep that cottage of yours maintained, let alone run a farm. Be sensible for once in your life. Your brother is more capable than you give him credit for," Emma interjected, her voice firm. "And he won't be alone." Thomas's amusement faded, replaced by a cold calculation. "The Matthews property. That's what you're thinking, isn't it? Well, good luck getting a loan. I happen to sit on the board of every major bank in the region." "We'll find a way," Oliver stated, meeting his brother's gaze steadily. "Always the dreamer," Thomas sneered. "Well, don't say I didn't try to help. When this little farming fantasy fails, and it will fail, don't come crying to me." As Thomas drove away, leaving a cloud of dust in his wake, Emma squeezed Oliver's hand. "He's wrong about you, you know. Your father knew it too, that's why he left you Augustus and these plans. Oliver looked at the thick stack of papers in his hand, then at Augustus, who had remained remarkably calm throughout the confrontation. Father always said that true wealth isn't about money. It's about what you build, what you create. Then let's build something amazing, Emma said, her eyes shining with determination. Something that will make both you and your father proud. As they stood there in the morning sun, surrounded by the peaceful sounds of the farm, Oliver felt a strange sense of purpose settling over him. His father's seemingly cruel joke of an inheritance was transforming into something else entirely. A challenge, an opportunity, a chance to prove that success could be measured in more than just pounds and pence. Augustus oinked softly, nudging Oliver's hand through the fence. Emma laughed, the sound carrying across the fields like a promise of better things to come. Together they began to plan their future, unaware that their decision to embrace this unusual inheritance would set in motion a chain of events that would change not only their lives, but the entire community of Millbrook. The Matthews property, despite its neglected state, held promise that only optimistic eyes could see. Oliver and Emma stood at its broken gate, surveying the overgrown fields and weathered buildings. 3 weeks had passed since the will reading, and they'd spent every spare moment planning their future. The local credit union approved our loan application, Emma announced, holding up an envelope with trembling hands. Mrs. Peterson said she was impressed with our business plan. She remembered your father, said he always spoke highly of sustainable farming. Oliver wrapped an arm around her shoulders, breathing in the earthy scent of early spring. We're really doing this, aren't we? We are, she smiled, then pulled out a folder from her bag. And we're not alone. Look what I found when I was researching heritage breed pigs. The folder contained articles about successful small-scale organic farms across Britain. But more importantly, it included correspondence between Oliver's father and various agricultural experts, dating back several years. He had been meticulously researching sustainable farming practices, collecting data on soil conservation, organic feed production, and ethical animal husbandry. He planned this, Oliver whispered, scanning the letters. All of it. Augustus isn't just any pig. He's the result of years of selective breeding for adaptability to organic farming conditions. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of George Whitaker, their first potential employee. The elderly farmer had worked the Matthews land decades ago, before industrial agriculture transformed the region. His weathered face broke into a smile as he approached. Your father used to talk about this, you know, George said, gesturing to the property. Said someday these fields would grow something more valuable than just crops. Reckon he meant you, lad. Over the next few hours, George shared his knowledge of the land's history, pointing out the best spots for different activities. The old barn, despite its shabby appearance, had solid bones. The south field, with its natural spring, would be perfect for rotating pig pastures. The western slope could accommodate terraced gardens for organic vegetables. As they walked the property, more locals began to arrive. Word had spread about Oliver and Emma's project, drawing curious neighbors and former farmhands. Some offered advice, others volunteered their help, and a few even brought tools and supplies. My grandfather's old tractor's just gathering dust, said Jimmy Fletcher, a local mechanic. Needs some work, but she'll run. Could be useful for you folks. The community's support was overwhelming, but not everyone shared their enthusiasm. Thomas's influence ran deep in Millbrook, and some locals viewed the project with suspicion. Whispers spread about the foolishness of organic farming in today's economy. That evening, as Oliver and Emma sat in their cottage reviewing renovation plans, a knock at the door revealed Sarah Collins, the local veterinarian. She held a thick manila envelope. Found these in my father's old files, she said, stepping inside. He was your father's vet for 30 years. These are Augustus's medical records, and something else you should see. The documents revealed that Augustus wasn't just a well-bred pig. He was part of a carefully documented breeding program aimed at developing a strain of pigs particularly suited to organic farming. The record showed exceptional disease resistance, feed conversion efficiency, and adaptability to free-range conditions. Your father was years ahead of his time, Sarah explained, pointing to specific genetic markers in the records. Augustus carries traits that could revolutionize sustainable pig farming, but he needs the right environment to thrive. As Sarah left, Emma turned to Oliver with excitement in her eyes. "Don't you see, your father wasn't just giving you a pig or even a farm. He was entrusting you with something revolutionary." Oliver nodded slowly, the pieces beginning to fall into place. "But why didn't he tell me? Why all the secrecy?" "Maybe," Emma suggested, "he wanted you to discover your own path, to build something yourself, without living in his shadow." The next morning, they began work on the farm in earnest. George arrived with his grandson and Jimmy Fletcher, tools in hand. Several local teenagers, former students of Oliver's, showed up eager to help. Even Mrs. Peterson from the credit union stopped by with sandwiches and encouragement. As Oliver watched the impromptu workforce tackle various projects, he felt a surge of emotion. This was more than just a business venture, it was becoming a community endeavor. Emma, covered in dust from cleaning out the old barn, caught his eye and smiled. The moment was interrupted by the sound of a helicopter passing low overhead. Thomas's company logo was clearly visible on its side as it circled the property. The message was clear. They were being watched. "Let him watch," Emma said defiantly, noting Oliver's concerned expression. "We have nothing to hide and everything to prove." Augustus, now settled in a temporary pen on the property, seemed to share their determination. He had already attracted attention from neighboring farmers, curious about his unusual characteristics. Several had requested to be put on a waiting list for potential offspring. As the sun set on their first day of real work, Oliver found a locked box while clearing out the old barn's office. The key, he realized with a start, was the odd-looking one that had been included with his father's papers. Inside, he found something that made his heart skip a beat, but before he could process the discovery, Emma's voice called out urgently from the pig pen. The day wasn't over yet, and neither were the surprises. Emma's urgent call drew Oliver away from the mysterious box, his discovery momentarily forgotten. He rushed to the pig pen, where he found her staring at Augustus with wide eyes. The pig was methodically rooting in a specific pattern along the fence line, exposing something metallic buried in the soil. "I've never seen anything like it," Emma said, watching Augustus work. "It's as if he's trying to show us something." Together they carefully excavated the area, revealing a waterproof container. Inside they found more of Oliver's father's research papers, along with detailed maps of the property marking underground springs and optimal planting zones, but most intriguingly, there was a letter addressed to both brothers. "We should tell Thomas," Emma suggested, holding the unopened envelope. Oliver hesitated. "Not yet. Let's understand what we're dealing with first." Back in the barn's office, they combined their discoveries. The box Oliver had found contained photographs of their father with various agricultural scientists, along with coded research notes. As they pieced together the information, a larger picture emerged. "Your father wasn't just developing a superior breed of pig," Emma realized, scanning the documents. "He was creating an entire sustainable farming system. The soil composition, the water management, the crop rotation, it's all interconnected." A knock at the barn door interrupted their investigation. James Harrison, their newly hired farm manager, entered with a concerned expression. "You need to see this," he said, leading them outside. At the property's edge, fresh survey markers had been placed, ones they hadn't authorized. A quick call to the council revealed that Thomas's company had applied for rezoning of the adjacent lands for industrial development. "He's trying to box us in," Oliver muttered, studying the markers. "If he gets approval for industrial use, it could affect our organic certification." Emma squeezed his hand. "Then we'll fight it. We've already got the community behind us." The next morning, they attended the local farmers market, setting up a booth to share their vision for the farm. They brought Augustus, whose presence drew curious onlookers. Sarah, the veterinarian, helped explain the unique characteristics of their heritage breeding program. The response was overwhelming. Local chefs expressed interest in their future products, families signed up for educational tours, and several farmers inquired about participating in their sustainable farming network. Even the local paper sent a reporter to cover the story, but success bred complications. That afternoon, they received an official-looking envelope. Inside was a notice from a major agricultural corporation claiming that Augustus's genetic line might infringe on their patents. The letter hinted at potential legal action. "This has Thomas written all over it," Oliver said, recognizing the law firm's name as one his brother often used. They were discussing their options when George burst into the barn, out of breath. "You've got visitors," he wheezed. "Suits. Lots of them." Outside, a group of corporate representatives waited, led by a sharp-featured woman who introduced herself as Victoria Hardwick, CEO of Agritech Solutions. Her smile didn't reach her eyes as she surveyed the property. "Mr. Blackwood, Ms. Watson," she began smoothly, "we're very interested in what you're developing here. Our company would like to discuss a potential partnership." "Partnership?" Emma asked skeptically. "Yes. We believe your breeding program could complement our research division. We're prepared to make a very generous offer for Augustus and all related research." Oliver studied the woman carefully. "And if we're not interested in selling?" Victoria's smile tightened. "Mr. Blackwood, surely you understand the complexities of modern agriculture. Small operations like this, they tend to face numerous challenges. Regulatory issues, market access problems, unexpected health crises among livestock." The threat was clear, but before Oliver could respond, they heard a commotion from the pig pen. Augustus had escaped his enclosure and was charging toward the group of executives, sending them scrambling back to their vehicles. As the dust settled, Emma tried to hide her amusement. "Well, I think Augustus made his position clear." That evening, as they secured the property for the night, Oliver returned to the mysterious box. Among the papers, he found a diary entry that made him pause. His father had written about a betrayal within the company, someone who had tried to steal his research years ago. The entry was incomplete, but one name stood out: Henderson, their family solicitor. "Emma," Oliver called, his voice tight with tension. "I think we need to look more closely at that will." As they prepared to delve deeper into the mystery, a figure watched from the shadows of the old oak tree at the property's edge. In their hand, they held a phone, speaking quietly. "They found the documents, yes, both sets. No, they don't know everything yet. But they will soon." The night settled over the farm, bringing with it a sense of foreboding. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but for now they had more questions than answers. Augustus watched from his pen as Oliver and Emma walked back to the cottage, his intelligent eyes reflecting the moonlight. The pig seemed to understand that the real battle was just beginning. The investigation into the will began in the most unlikely of places, the local pub. Michael Fairfield, the childhood friend of both Blackwood brothers, had returned to Millbrook after 15 years abroad. Now a forensic accountant, he sat across from Oliver and Emma in a quiet corner of the King's Arms, examining the documents they'd discovered. "Your father was brilliant, Ollie," Michael said, spreading out the papers. "These coding systems in his research notes, they're not just about pig breeding. They're recording financial transactions, unofficial meetings, suspicious activities within the company." Emma leaned forward. "Can you decipher them?" "Some," Michael replied, pointing to a series of numbers. "Look here, dates and amounts corresponding to meetings with Henderson. Your father was tracking him for years." The pub's door swung open, and Thomas strode in. He stopped short at the sight of Michael, genuine surprise crossing his features. "Mike? Nobody told me you were back." "Hello, Thomas," Michael responded carefully. "Just catching up with old friends." Thomas's eyes narrowed at the papers scattered across the table. "I see. Well, don't let me interrupt your little reunion." He turned to leave, then paused. "Though I must say, Mike, it's disappointing to see you associating with the family disappointment." "The only disappointment," Michael called after him, "is seeing what you've become, Thomas." After Thomas left, Michael turned back to Oliver. "He's changed so much. The Thomas I knew would never have treated you this way." "People change," Oliver said quietly. "Not always on their own," Michael countered. "Something happened while I was away. Something that transformed Thomas from your protective older brother into this." The next morning, they met with Sarah Collins again. The veterinarian had been reviewing her father's old records, finding more connections to the mystery. "Look at these dates," she said, pointing to certain medical records. "Every time your father made a breakthrough in his research, Henderson scheduled an audit of the company's agricultural division, and each time, research data went missing." Emma noticed a pattern. The audits always happened when Thomas was overseeing projects abroad. "Exactly," Sarah confirmed. "It's as if someone was deliberately keeping Thomas away." Their discussion was interrupted by a commotion outside. Augustus was acting strangely again. this time leading them to an old storage shed they hadn't yet explored. Inside, hidden beneath years of dust and farming equipment, they found a locked filing cabinet. The key from the box, Oliver remembered, pulling it from his pocket. It fit perfectly. The cabinet contained a treasure trove of information, original research notes, correspondence, and most importantly, a draft of their father's will that was markedly different from the final version. "This can't be right," Oliver muttered, comparing the documents. "According to this draft, Father intended to split everything equally between Thomas and me, with specific conditions about continuing his sustainable farming research." "There's more," Emma said, pulling out a thick envelope. "Letters between your father and Thomas from 5 years ago. Thomas was actually supportive of the sustainable farming initiative back then. He wanted to help expand it." Michael studied the letters. "The tone changes suddenly in these later ones. It's subtle, but Thomas becomes more aggressive, more focused on conventional profit margins. It's like he became a different person." As they pieced together the puzzle, George burst in, looking troubled. "You need to see this," he said, leading them to the farm's entrance. A team of surveyors was marking out the access road, accompanied by official-looking vehicles. A woman in a business suit approached them with a clipboard. "Mr. Blackwood, I'm representing the council's planning committee. We're assessing the road for potential industrial traffic. It seems there's been a request to reclassify this area for heavy vehicle access." Oliver recognized another of Thomas's tactics to disrupt their operation. But this time something felt different. The woman slipped him a note when no one was looking. "Not all of us support what's happening. Check planning application 47592. Something's not right." That evening, as they reviewed their findings in the barn office, they received an unexpected visitor. Mrs. Peterson from the credit union arrived looking nervous. "I shouldn't be here," she said, glancing over her shoulder. "But I found something in our old loan records. 10 years ago, Henderson took out a massive loan using Blackwood Industries as collateral. The paperwork was signed by Thomas, but the signatures, they don't match his other documents from that period." "Forged signatures?" Michael asked, his forensic training kicking in. "It appears so. The loan was paid off 6 months later through a series of complex offshore transactions." As they absorbed this information, Augustus began making a commotion in his pen. Through the barn window, they spotted a figure hurrying away from the property, disappearing into the gathering dusk. "We're getting close to something," Emma said, watching Oliver's troubled expression. "Something big enough to make people nervous?" Oliver picked up one of his father's coded notebooks. Dad knew. He knew all along what was happening, but he couldn't confront it directly. That's why he set this up. The inheritance, Augustus, everything. But why? Emma wondered. Why not just expose Henderson? Because it's not just about Henderson, Michael realized, studying the documents. Your father was protecting something or someone. The question is who? As night fell over the farm, Oliver made a decision. It's time to talk to Thomas, not to accuse, but to understand. Whatever happened 5 years ago changed him, and I think Henderson is at the heart of it. They locked away their discoveries, unaware that their conversation had been overheard. In the darkness outside, a phone glowed as a message was sent. They're putting it together faster than we anticipated. Henderson wants to know if we should proceed with the next phase. The reply came swiftly. Not yet. Wait for my signal. Everything must appear to be their idea. Inside his pen, Augustus watched the farm's entrance with unusual intensity, as if he too were guarding secrets that had yet to come to light. The Millbrook Agricultural Show had been a local tradition for over a century, and despite their recent challenges, Oliver and Emma decided to participate. They set up their stand early, proudly displaying plans for their sustainable farm alongside samples of their first organic vegetables. Augustus, now something of a local celebrity, had his own special enclosure. Children gathered around, fascinated by his intelligent behavior and unusual markings. Sarah Collins had set up an educational display explaining the importance of heritage breeding programs. It's more than just farming, Emma explained to a group of interested visitors. It's about preserving agricultural heritage while moving towards a sustainable future. The mood shifted when Thomas arrived with Victoria Hardwick and a group of Agritech executives. They moved through the show like a dark cloud, their presence causing whispers and worried glances. Quite the little display you've put together. Thomas remarked, studying their stand with feigned interest. "Though I notice you haven't mentioned your recent pest control issues." Oliver stiffened. They'd managed to keep that problem quiet. Someone had deliberately damaged their organic pest control systems last week, nearly compromising their certification. "We've handled it," Oliver replied evenly. "Just like we'll handle whatever else comes our way." "So confident," Victoria smiled coldly. "Yet you haven't responded to our latest offer. 10 times what this little operation is worth, plus guaranteed positions within Agritech's research division." "Some things aren't for sale," Emma interjected. Thomas's expression darkened. "Everything's for sale, Ms. Watson. It's just a matter of finding the right pressure point." As they walked away, Michael appeared at Oliver's side. "Interesting timing," he murmured. "I've just finished analyzing those loan documents. The offshore account that paid off Henderson's loan? It belongs to a shell company registered to Agritech Solutions." Before Oliver could respond, a commotion erupted near the main exhibition hall. Protesters had appeared carrying signs condemning organic farming as inefficient and accusing small farms of holding back agricultural progress. "That's not a spontaneous protest," George observed, appearing beside them. "Half those people aren't even from Millbrook." Oliver watched as news cameras arrived, conveniently just in time to capture the protest. But something else caught his attention: Thomas's reaction. For a brief moment, his brother's mask slipped, showing not triumph, but what looked like genuine distress. Taking a chance, Oliver followed Thomas as he slipped away from the crowd. He found his brother standing alone behind the exhibition hall, staring at their father's photograph in the Hall of Fame display. "He knew, didn't he?" Thomas asked without turning around. "About everything?" "I think so," Oliver replied carefully. "The question is, do you?" Thomas turned, and for the first time in years, Oliver saw uncertainty in his brother's eyes. "It's not that simple, Oliver. There are things you don't understand." "Then help me understand. What happened 5 years ago? What did Henderson do to you?" "To me?" Thomas laughed bitterly. "Henderson didn't do anything to me. He showed me what I could become, what had to be done to survive in this world. By forging your signatures? By stealing Dad's research?" Thomas's head snapped up. "What did you say?" "We found the evidence, Thomas. The forged loan documents, the suspicious audits, the altered will. What I don't understand is why you went along with it." A complex emotion crossed Thomas's face. He opened his mouth to respond, but was interrupted by Victoria's arrival. "Thomas, the reporters are ready for your statement about the protest," she announced, shooting Oliver a warning look. "Of course," Thomas replied, his mask of indifference sliding back into place. But as he walked away, he whispered to Oliver, "Check Father's study." 3rd floorboard from the window. The rest of the show passed in a blur of activity. Their stand won several awards, including Most Innovative Agricultural Project. But Oliver's mind was on Thomas's cryptic message. That evening, after the crowds had gone, Oliver and Emma made their way to the family estate. Using the key they still had from the will reading, they entered the study and located the floorboard Thomas had mentioned. Beneath it, they found a USB drive and a handwritten note in their father's writing. "For when the truth becomes clear, trust no one until you've seen everything." Back at the farm, they gathered their allies, Michael, Sarah, and George, to examine the drive's contents. As the files loaded, Augustus began making unusual sounds from his pen. "Someone's here," George whispered, peering out the window. Through the gathering darkness, they could see figures moving across the property, approaching the barn with purpose. Emma quickly copied the files to another drive and slipped it into her pocket. "Whatever's on here," she said, "someone doesn't want us to see it." The barn door rattled. Augustus's warning calls grew louder. "There's something else you should know," Michael said quickly. "I found another connection. Henderson wasn't just working with Agritech. He was working with someone inside Blackwood Industries, someone high up enough to access everything." "Who?" Oliver demanded. Before Michael could answer, the barn door burst open, but instead of thugs or corporate agents, they found themselves facing Thomas, alone, out of breath, and looking more frightened than Oliver had ever seen him. "Get out," he gasped, "all of you. They're coming, and this time they're not bothering with legal threats." Outside, vehicle headlights illuminated the farmyard, and the sound of multiple engines filled the night air. The farmyard blazed with artificial daylight as vehicles surrounded the barn. Thomas quickly ushered everyone towards the back exit, his usual corporate polish replaced by urgent determination. "There's a path through the old orchard," he whispered. "George, you know it?" The old farmer nodded. "Like the back of my hand. Used it for years before the new road went in." "Good. Take Michael and Sarah that way. Oliver, Emma, you're coming with me. There's something you need to see." Emma clutched the USB drive. "What about Augustus?" As if in answer, the pig let out a series of grunts that sent the other animals into a frenzy. The resulting chaos provided perfect cover for their escape, as the intruders were forced to deal with escaped chickens and an overly protective goat. Thomas led Oliver and Emma to his Range Rover, hidden in a grove of trees. As they drove through the darkness, he finally began to explain. 5 years ago, I discovered some discrepancies in the company accounts. Large sums of money moving through shell corporations, research data being sold to competitors. I traced it back to Henderson, but he was just the visible part of the operation. Agritech, Oliver suggested. Among others. They wanted Dad's research, but not to develop it, to bury it. Sustainable farming practices, ethical animal husbandry, organic pest control methods, it all threatened their business model. But when I confronted Henderson, he showed me documents. Forged papers suggesting Dad had been embezzling money for years. Emma gasped. "You knew they were forged?" "Not at first. Henderson claimed he'd been covering for Dad, making it look legitimate. He said if I didn't play along, he'd release the documents, ruining Dad's reputation and destroying the company." Oliver studied his brother's profile in the darkness. "Why didn't you tell Dad?" "I thought I was protecting him." By then, Henderson had compromised several board members. He threatened to expose Dad's supposed crimes, bankrupt the company, and ruin hundreds of employees' livelihoods. I made the wrong choice." They arrived at a small cottage on the outskirts of town. Inside, they found Henderson's assistant, Jenny Parker, waiting with a stack of documents. "I've been helping Thomas gather evidence for the past year," she explained. "Mr. Henderson doesn't know I discovered his private files." The documents revealed a conspiracy larger than they'd imagined. Henderson had been working with a network of corrupt executives across multiple companies, all aimed at maintaining control over agricultural practices in the region. But Dad knew, Oliver realized. That's why he set up the inheritance this way. Augustus, the farm, the hidden documents, it was all to expose the truth. Not just expose it, Thomas corrected. To fight it. Dad's research wasn't just about breeding better pigs. It was about creating a sustainable farming system that could be replicated anywhere. Augustus carries genetic traits that make organic farming more viable, more profitable. If widely adopted, it would transform agriculture in the region. Emma connected the dots. That's why Agritech is so interested. If our model succeeds, their entire business model becomes obsolete, Thomas finished. Along with their network of chemical suppliers, industrial equipment manufacturers, and processed food producers. A phone buzzed, Jenny's secure line. "They're searching the farm systematically," she reported. "But they haven't found Augustus." Thomas smiled for the first time that night. "They won't. That pig's smarter than most people I know. Dad made sure of that." "We need to get this information to the authorities," Oliver said, holding up the USB drive. "But we need proof of Henderson's current activities, not just past crimes." "Already handled," Thomas replied. "Remember those protesters at the agricultural show? I made sure every payment was traceable back to Henderson's private accounts. Jenny's been documenting everything." Emma looked at Thomas with new understanding. "You've been playing double agent all this time?" "Not at first, but after Dad. After he was gone, I found a letter he'd left me. He knew what Henderson had done, knew I'd tried to protect the company. He didn't blame me, but he challenged me to make it right. That's when I started gathering evidence." Oliver reached out and gripped his brother's shoulder. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Henderson watches everything. I had to maintain the facade, make him believe I was still under his control. The only way to protect you and the farm was to appear to be working against you." Suddenly, Jenny's phone lit up again. "They've called off the search at the farm. But there's something else. Henderson's just called an emergency board meeting for tomorrow morning. He's going to try to force through the industrial rezoning," Thomas realized. "If that happens, the farm will be surrounded by industrial development. You'll never get organic certification." "Then we'll stop him," Oliver said firmly. together. It won't be easy, Thomas warned. He's got half the board in his pocket, and evidence of years of corruption might not be enough to convince the others quickly. We don't need the board, Emma interjected, a plan forming. We need the shareholders, and tomorrow's the annual shareholders meeting. Thomas's eyes lit up with understanding, which Henderson conveniently scheduled right after the board meeting. Exactly, Emma continued. If we can present our evidence there with both brothers united. The shareholders would have the power to force an immediate investigation, Thomas finished. Henderson wouldn't be able to stop it. Oliver looked at his brother. Are you ready for this? Once we start, there's no going back. Thomas straightened his shoulders, looking more like the brother Oliver remembered from their youth. I've been hiding long enough. It's time to finish what Dad started. As they planned their next moves, a message came through from George. Augustus and the other animals were safe, hidden in an old warehouse owned by Sarah's family. The pig had apparently led the others to safety through the chaos, displaying an intelligence that seemed almost uncanny. Dad always said Augustus was special, Thomas mused. I never realized just how special until now. The night stretched ahead of them, full of preparation and possibility. Tomorrow would bring either triumph or disaster, but for the first time in years, the Blackwood brothers would face it together. The Blackwood Industries headquarters buzzed with unusual energy that morning. Shareholders filed into the grand conference room, greeted by Henderson's practiced smile. Victoria Hardwick sat in the front row, her confidence evident in her relaxed posture. The board meeting was scheduled for 9 a.m., with the shareholders' meeting to follow at 11. Henderson had planned it carefully, push through the rezoning quickly, present it to the shareholders as a fait accompli, and crush any opposition before it could mobilize. What he hadn't planned for was Thomas arriving early, accompanied by Oliver and Emma. The brothers wore matching expressions of determination as they took their seats at the board table. Thomas, Henderson nodded, hiding his surprise. I wasn't expecting you until the vote. A lot of unexpected things happening lately, Thomas replied calmly. Like those protesters at the agricultural show. Interesting how they all received payments from a certain offshore account. Henderson's smile tightened, almost imperceptibly. I'm not sure what you're implying. No implications needed, Oliver added, placing a folder on the table. We have proof. The board meeting began with its usual formalities, but tension crackled beneath the surface. When Henderson moved to begin the rezoning vote, Thomas stood. Before we proceed, I believe the board should review some concerning information about recent company activities. Henderson's facade cracked slightly. This isn't the time for distractions, Thomas. We have a schedule to maintain. On the contrary, Thomas countered, this is exactly the time. He nodded to Jenny, who began distributing documents to board members. These papers show a pattern of corruption that threatens the very foundation of Blackwood Industries. For the next hour, Thomas and Oliver presented their evidence. Bank transfers, forged documents, secret meetings. The web of deception unraveled before the stunned board members. This is absurd, Henderson blustered. These documents could easily be fabricated. And may I remind everyone that Thomas himself approved many of these transactions. Under duress, Thomas acknowledged. After you threatened to frame our father for embezzlement. The boardroom erupted in murmurs. Victoria Hardwick stood abruptly, moving towards the door, but found her path blocked by security guards, arranged in advance by Jenny. As the evidence mounted, Henderson's composure finally shattered. Everything I did was for the company's benefit. Arthur Blackwood's ridiculous sustainable farming notions would have destroyed our profit margins. Someone had to protect our interests. Our interests? Oliver stepped forward. Or Agritech's interests? Jenny projected emails onto the boardroom screen, correspondence between Henderson and Agritech, revealing a long-term plan to dismantle Blackwood Industries from within. The real threat to this company, Thomas declared, wasn't our father's vision for sustainable agriculture. It was the short-sighted greed that put profits above innovation and integrity. The board voted unanimously to suspend Henderson pending a full investigation. Victoria Hardwick was detained for questioning by the authorities Jenny had quietly summoned. But the real victory came at the shareholders' meeting. Standing together, the Blackwood brothers presented their father's complete vision, a revolutionary approach to sustainable farming that could transform the industry while maintaining profitability. "Our father didn't just breed a special pig," Oliver explained to the shareholders. "He developed an entire sustainable agricultural system. Augustus represents years of careful genetic selection, creating a breed perfectly adapted to organic farming methods." Thomas took over. "The research Henderson tried to suppress proves that sustainable farming can be more profitable than industrial methods in the long term. Lower input costs, premium product pricing, and environmental benefits that will position Blackwood Industries at the forefront of agricultural innovation." Emma presented the projected financials, showing how their model could be scaled across the region. The shareholders were particularly interested in the international patents their father had secretly secured, protecting the genetic innovations represented by Augustus. As the meeting concluded, an elderly shareholder approached the brothers. "Your father would be proud," she said, smiling. "He always said his greatest achievement wasn't his research. It was raising two sons who would eventually understand each other." Back at the farm that evening, they found Augustus had led the other animals back from their hiding place. The pig watched contentedly as Oliver and Thomas stood in the fading sunlight, finally at peace with each other and their inheritance. Dad knew this would happen, Oliver realized. The unequal inheritance, the hidden messages, Augustus. It was all designed to bring us together. He knew we'd only find the truth if we worked together, Thomas agreed. The sustainable farming project needed both of us, your vision and my business experience. Emma joined them, holding more papers from their father's files. "Look at this. His original business plan included both of you, the farm and the company working together, creating a model for the future of agriculture." As night fell over Millbrook Farm, the brothers began planning their next steps. The fight wasn't over. There would be resistance from those whose profits depended on industrial farming methods. But together, they were ready to continue their father's legacy. Augustus watched from his pen, his intelligent eyes reflecting the last rays of sunlight. In the end, a pig had helped heal a family, expose corruption, and just might revolutionize farming itself. Not bad for an inheritance that had once seemed like a joke. The weeks following Henderson's exposure brought dramatic changes to Millbrook. News of the scandal made national headlines, prompting investigations into similar practices across the agricultural industry. But while the media focused on corporate intrigue, the Blackwood brothers turned their attention to realizing their father's vision. Thomas moved his office from the corporate headquarters to a converted barn on the farm property. His business expertise proved invaluable as they began scaling up operations. Emma's educational background helped them develop training programs for other farmers interested in adopting their sustainable methods. "It's remarkable," Sarah Collins commented one morning, reviewing Augustus's latest health check. "His offspring are showing the same adaptive traits. The genetic stability is far beyond what we typically see in heritage breeding programs." The pig had become something of a celebrity in agricultural circles. Farmers from across the country visited to learn about the sustainable farming system built around his unique characteristics. Each visitor left with a deeper understanding of how traditional farming wisdom could combine with modern innovation. Oliver found himself in a new role, bridging the gap between traditional farmers and the corporate agricultural world. His teaching experience helped him explain complex concepts in accessible ways, while his growing business acumen enabled him to demonstrate the financial viability of their methods. "You've changed," Emma observed one evening, finding him reviewing crop rotation plans in their cottage, "but in a good way. You're not just teaching anymore, you're leading." The farm itself was transforming. The Matthews property, once neglected, now showcased different aspects of sustainable agriculture. The old barn became a research center, where scientists studied everything from soil composition to animal behavior. The fields demonstrated various organic farming techniques, while new greenhouses tested innovative growing methods. Thomas threw himself into the project with unexpected passion. His corporate skills found new purpose in creating sustainable business models that other small farms could adopt. The brothers worked together to establish a network of family farms implementing their father's methods, with Millbrook Farm serving as the hub for research and training. "Dad would have loved this," Thomas remarked one day, watching a group of agricultural students touring the property. "But I don't think even he imagined how far it would go." The transformation wasn't without challenges. Some local farmers remained skeptical, while others worried about the costs of converting to organic methods. The brothers addressed these concerns by establishing a support system, including microloans and mentoring programs. "It's not just about farming differently," Oliver explained during a community meeting. "It's about farming better, for our families, our communities, and our future." The initiative gained unexpected support from an environmental research institute studying sustainable agriculture. Their data showed that farms adopting the Blackwood methods saw improved soil health, increased biodiversity, and better water retention, all while maintaining profitability. Augustus's role in the project continued to surprise them. Beyond his genetic contributions, his behavior provided insights into animal intelligence and welfare. Researchers studying him discovered that his problem-solving abilities and social intelligence weren't flukes. They were traits that could be cultivated in other animals through proper breeding and care. Emma's influence grew as well. Her background in education proved crucial in developing training programs for new farmers. She worked with local schools to establish agricultural education initiatives, inspiring a new generation to see farming as a blend of tradition and innovation. The community began to change too. As more farms adopted sustainable practices, local restaurants and markets shifted their focus to organic, locally sourced produce. Tourism increased as people came to learn about sustainable farming, bringing new economic opportunities to Millbrook. One morning, while reviewing applications from farmers wanting to join their network, Oliver found an old photograph in his father's desk. It showed Arthur Blackwood standing in the same fields they now cultivated, a young Thomas and Oliver beside him, both grinning proudly. "He was teaching us even then," Thomas said, looking over his brother's shoulder. "Every summer day we spent on the farm, every lesson about respecting the land and its creatures, it was all preparation for this." The photograph sparked a memory, leading them to revisit their father's old study. Hidden behind a loose panel, they found more of his journals, including detailed notes about Augustus's lineage. The breeding program had been more extensive than they'd realized, with connections to traditional pig breeds from across Europe. "Look at this," Emma exclaimed, examining the journals. "Your father wasn't just developing a superior breed. He was preserving genetic diversity that was being lost to industrial farming. Augustus carries traits from rare heritage breeds, traits that could be crucial for adapting to climate change." As they delved deeper into their father's research, they uncovered another layer of his vision. The sustainable farming system wasn't just about organic methods or animal welfare. It was about preserving agricultural heritage while innovating for the future. The day's last light found the brothers walking the farm's boundaries, discussing plans for expansion. Augustus followed them, occasionally stopping to root in specific spots, still seeming to guide them to new discoveries. "Sometimes I wonder if he understands more than we think," Oliver mused, watching the pig investigate an old boundary stone. "After everything that's happened," Thomas replied, "I wouldn't be surprised. Dad always said the best teachers come in unexpected forms." The brothers paused at the farm's highest point, looking out over the patchwork of fields and hedgerows. The setting sun painted the landscape in shades of gold, highlighting the changes they'd already made and hinting at possibilities still to come. "We're not just continuing Dad's work," Oliver realized. "We're expanding it, taking it places he might never have imagined." "That's exactly what he wanted," Thomas smiled. "He gave us the foundation. The rest is up to us." As night settled over Millbrook Farm, lights glowed in the research center where scientists continued their work. In the distance, cars pulled away from the evening's community meeting, carrying new converts to sustainable farming. And in his specially designed enclosure, Augustus settled down to sleep, surrounded by the next generation of extraordinary pigs that would help change the face of British agriculture. Spring arrived in Millbrook with unprecedented activity. The farm had become a hub of innovation, drawing visitors from across Europe and beyond. Oliver and Emma's cottage garden overflowed with experimental crops, while Thomas's newly built office buzzed with international calls and meetings. The morning began with an unexpected arrival, a delegation from the Royal Agricultural Society. They had come to evaluate the farm's methods for their annual Innovation Award. The brothers had kept their application quiet, wanting the project to be judged on its merits rather than publicity. "It's not just the sustainable practices that interest us," explained Dr. Margaret Wilson, the Society's lead researcher. It's the integration of traditional farming wisdom with modern science. You've created something entirely new here. The evaluation team spent hours touring the facility, paying special attention to Augustus's breeding program. The pig's offspring had begun showing remarkable adaptability to various farming conditions, proving the sustainability of their father's vision. Your father's research was decades ahead of its time, Dr. Wilson commented, reviewing the genetic data. These traits, disease resistance, feed efficiency, adaptability to free-range conditions, they're exactly what modern agriculture needs to become truly sustainable. Thomas, who had once dismissed organic farming as unprofitable, now enthusiastically explained their financial models to the visitors. We're proving that ethical farming can be more profitable than industrial methods. Lower input costs, premium prices for quality products, and improved soil health leading to better long-term yields. The transformation in Thomas had been remarkable. His corporate expertise, once focused solely on profit margins, now served a broader purpose. He worked tirelessly to make sustainable farming accessible to small farmers, developing financial tools and business models that made conversion to organic methods viable. Oliver found his brother in their father's old study that evening after the delegation had left. Thomas was reading through more of their father's journals, his expression thoughtful. "Remember how Dad used to tell us that real wealth grows from the soil?" Thomas asked, looking up. "I never understood what he meant until now." Their conversation was interrupted by Emma rushing in, clutching a tablet. "You need to see this," she exclaimed. "The soil analysis from the North Field just came back. The regenerative techniques we've been using, they're working better than anyone predicted. The data showed remarkable improvements in soil health and biodiversity. Areas that had been depleted by years of industrial farming were showing signs of recovery far ahead of projected timelines. It's not just the soil," Oliver added, reviewing the reports. "The whole ecosystem is recovering. Birds, insects, even wild plants that haven't been seen in years are returning to the area." The success was drawing attention from unexpected quarters. Investment funds focused on sustainable agriculture began approaching them, interested in replicating their model across the country. Environmental groups praised their holistic approach to farming, while food security experts studied their methods for potential application in developing regions. But perhaps the most significant change was in the local community. Farmers who had initially skeptical were now regular visitors, seeking advice on converting their own operations. The brothers established a mentoring program, pairing experienced organic farmers with those looking to make the transition. "We're creating more than just a farm," Emma observed during a community meeting. "We're building a movement." The movement gained momentum when a major supermarket chain committed to sourcing produce exclusively from farms using their sustainable methods. The contract included fair pricing guarantees and support for farmers during the transition to organic practices. Augustus, now approaching his senior years, continued to surprise them. His latest contribution came during a visit from a group of climate scientists studying agricultural adaptation to environmental changes. The pig's behavior led them to discover previously unknown water sources on the property, demonstrating an almost uncanny ability to locate natural resources. "Your father knew exactly what he was doing," Sarah Collins remarked, watching Augustus with his latest litter of piglets. "He wasn't just breeding for physical traits. He was selecting for intelligence, adaptability, even intuition." As summer approached, the brothers received news that their father's research was being considered for inclusion in the National Agricultural Archive. The recognition validated years of work that many had once dismissed as eccentric or impractical. "He would have loved this," Oliver said, sorting through boxes of research notes for the archive. "Not the recognition, but knowing his ideas were helping people." Thomas nodded, picking up a photograph of their father with a young Augustus. "He always said the right inheritance would reveal itself in time. I thought he was talking about money or property, but he meant knowledge, understanding, purpose." The brothers' relationship had evolved into a true partnership. Thomas's business acumen complemented Oliver's practical farming knowledge, while Emma's educational expertise helped them share their methods with others. Together, they were accomplishing more than any of them could have achieved alone. One evening, as the sun set over the flourishing fields of Millbrook Farm, Oliver found Thomas sitting with Augustus in the old orchard. The pig was contentedly rooting among the apple trees, occasionally nudging a fallen fruit toward them. "Sometimes I wonder if he knows what he helped create," Thomas mused, watching Augustus's gentle movements. "I think he knows more than we imagine," Oliver replied. "Dad always said the best teachers don't just share knowledge, they inspire us to discover our own path." The brothers sat in companionable silence, watching the day fade into dusk. Around them, the farm hummed with life, crops growing, animals settling for the night, researchers working late in the laboratories. In the distance, lights began to twinkle in the windows of neighboring farms, many now part of their growing sustainable network. Augustus settled between them, his presence a living reminder of their father's wisdom. The inheritance that had once seemed like a cruel joke had become a gift beyond measure, not just to the brothers, but to the future of farming itself. 1 year after Henderson's exposure, Millbrook had transformed beyond recognition. The once quiet market town had become a beacon of agricultural innovation, drawing visitors from around the world. The autumn morning brought a special gathering to the farm, the inaugural Sustainable Farming Conference, hosted by the Blackwood brothers. Farmers, researchers, and agricultural experts filled the newly constructed conference center, built from sustainable materials and powered by renewable energy. The facility stood as a testament to the brothers' commitment to innovation, its design incorporating both traditional farming wisdom and modern sustainability practices. Oliver stood at the podium, addressing the packed auditorium. "A year ago, many called our methods impractical, our goals unrealistic. Today, over 50 farms in our network are proving that sustainable agriculture isn't just environmentally responsible, it's economically viable." Thomas followed with a presentation of their results. The numbers were impressive: increased crop yields, reduced input costs, premium prices for organic products, and most importantly, improved soil health across all participating farms. Emma's educational programs had expanded beyond their initial scope. Schools across the country were adopting her curriculum, teaching children about sustainable agriculture and environmental stewardship. Her work had caught the attention of international education organizations, leading to partnerships with schools worldwide. During a break in the conference, the brothers found themselves in the Heritage Breeds exhibition hall. Augustus, now officially retired from breeding, but still the farm's mascot, had his own special display showcasing his contribution to sustainable agriculture. "Remember when we thought he was just a pig?" Oliver mused, watching Augustus interact with visitors. The animal's intelligence and gentle nature continued to charm everyone he met. "Dad knew exactly what he was doing," Thomas replied. "He saw potential where others saw limitations." In Augustus, in the farm, in us. The conference brought unexpected reunions. Victoria Hardwick, who had served time for her role in Henderson's scheme, approached them during lunch. Her time in prison had changed her perspective, and she now worked with a non-profit organization promoting ethical business practices in agriculture. "What you've built here," she said, gesturing to the thriving farm around them, "it's what I should have been working towards all along. Not fighting change, but embracing it." The afternoon sessions focused on the future. Scientists presented research on Augustus's offspring, showing how their unique genetic traits could help farms adapt to changing climate conditions. Agricultural economists discussed new financial models based on the Blackwood system, making sustainable farming accessible to small-scale farmers. Michael Fairfield, who had helped expose Henderson's corruption, presented findings from his investigation into agricultural industry practices. His work had led to reforms in corporate oversight and stronger protections for family farms. "The Blackwood case didn't just expose one instance of corruption," he explained. "It revealed systemic problems in how we approach agriculture. But it also showed us a better way forward." As evening approached, the brothers hosted a special dinner in the restored barn. Local chefs prepared dishes using ingredients from network farms, showcasing the quality of their organic produce. The meal became a celebration of community, bringing together farmers, researchers, and townspeople who had supported their vision. During the dinner, Sarah Collins announced a breakthrough in their breeding program. Augustus's genetic line had produced offspring with even greater adaptability to organic farming conditions. The implications for sustainable agriculture were enormous. "Your father's work," she told the brothers, wasn't just about creating a better pig. It was about proving that we can work with nature instead of against it. George Whitaker, now training the next generation of sustainable farmers, raised a toast to Arthur Blackwood's memory. "He saw what farming could be," the old farmer said, his voice thick with emotion. "And through his sons he showed us all the way." Later that night, after the guests had gone, Oliver found Thomas in their father's study. His brother was reading through one of their father's earliest journals, smiling at the familiar handwriting. "Listen to this," Thomas said. "The true test of any inheritance is not what it's worth, but what it becomes. Money can be spent, land can be sold, but knowledge, wisdom, and purpose, these grow with each generation." Oliver sat across from his brother, remembering the angry young man who had once seemed so foreign to him. "He knew we'd need each other," he said quietly. "That only together could we build something lasting." Through the window they could see Augustus in his special enclosure, surrounded by the latest generation of piglets. The old pig watched over them, with what seemed like pride, his intelligence and gentle nature clearly visible in his offspring. "We're not just continuing Dad's work," Thomas reflected. "We're expanding it, taking it in directions he might never have imagined." Emma joined them, carrying fresh data from their latest soil analysis. "The regeneration rates are exceeding all projections," she reported excitedly. "The methods we've developed here could help restore farmland across the country." As night fell over Millbrook Farm, the brothers and Emma sat in the study, planning their next steps. The conference had brought new opportunities, new partnerships, and new challenges. But they faced them together, stronger for the journey that had brought them to this point. Augustus's content grunting drifted through the open window, a reminder of the unexpected inheritance that had changed everything. The pig that had once seemed like a joke had become a symbol of innovation, sustainability, and the power of seeing potential where others saw only limitations. 5 years had passed since the reading of Arthur Blackwood's will. Millbrook Farm had grown into something beyond anyone's expectations, a thriving center of agricultural innovation that was changing the face of farming across Britain and beyond. The spring morning dawned clear and bright as Oliver and Emma walked through the teaching gardens with their young daughter Lucy. At 4 years old, she shared her parents' love for the farm, especially her special friendship with Augustus, who had become a gentle guardian to the next generation of Blackwoods. "Uncle Thomas is coming," Lucy called out excitedly, pointing toward the main drive where Thomas's car was approaching. He wasn't alone. His wife Claire, whom he'd met during an agricultural conference 2 years ago, was with him. The brothers met in the courtyard, surrounded by the sounds and scents of the flourishing farm. "The Ministry of Agriculture approved our proposal," Thomas announced without preamble, his face breaking into a broad smile. "The Blackwood Sustainable Farming Initiative will be implemented nationwide." The news represented years of hard work, countless presentations, demonstrations, and negotiations. The initiative would provide support and resources for farmers transitioning to sustainable methods, using the systems they'd developed at Millbrook as a model. "Dad would have loved this," Oliver said, looking out over the farm that had grown far beyond its original boundaries. The network of sustainable farms now stretched across the country, each one adapting and improving upon the original methods. The family gathered in the new visitor center, once the old barn where they'd hidden from Henderson's thugs. Photos lined the walls, their father's research, the early days of the farm, Augustus's first piglets, the expanding network of sustainable farms. Each image told part of their story. Sarah Collins joined them, bringing the latest research results. Augustus's lineage had produced over 20 generations of pigs, each displaying the remarkable traits that made sustainable farming more viable. The breeding program had expanded to include other livestock, all selected for their ability to thrive in organic farming conditions. "Your father's vision wasn't just about farming differently," Sarah explained, showing them the data. "It was about proving that success and sustainability aren't mutually exclusive." Emma's educational programs had become a model for agricultural education worldwide. Students from dozens of countries now came to Millbrook to learn sustainable farming practices. The sight of young farmers walking the fields, learning from both traditional wisdom and modern science, would have made Arthur Blackwood proud. As they walked the property, they passed the memorial garden where their father's favorite chair now sat. It had become a place of reflection, surrounded by heritage plants and visited by those seeking inspiration for their own agricultural endeavors. Augustus, now in his twilight years but still remarkably spry, joined them on their walk. The pig that had once seemed like a cruel joke in a will had become a symbol of revolutionary change in British agriculture. His genetics had helped create a new breed of pig, perfectly suited to organic farming, while his intelligence had taught them valuable lessons about animal welfare and behavior. "Sometimes I think he understood Dad's plan better than we did," Thomas mused, watching Augustus interact gently with Lucy. The pig's legacy would live on through his offspring, but his impact extended far beyond genetics. The brothers had each found their role in the growing enterprise. Oliver's teaching experience and practical farming knowledge helped others understand and implement sustainable methods. Thomas's business acumen ensured their model remained profitable and replicable. Together with Emma's educational expertise, they had created something unique, a blend of tradition and innovation that was transforming agriculture. As evening approached, the family gathered for dinner in the farmhouse kitchen. The meal, prepared with ingredients from their own fields and those of network farms, represented everything they had achieved: sustainable, ethical, and delicious food that supported local communities. "I found something interesting in Dad's old papers," Thomas said, pulling out a yellowed envelope. Inside was a letter dated just days before their father's passing, but it had never been sent. "My dear sons," Thomas read aloud, "by the time you read this, you will have either embraced the challenge I've set before you or walked away from it. I trust you've chosen wisely. The pig I've left to Oliver isn't just an animal. He's a key to understanding what farming could be. The business I've left to Thomas isn't just a company, it's a tool for creating change. Together, they represent something greater than either could be alone." "Just like my sons." Oliver felt Emma's hand slip into his as Thomas continued reading. "The true inheritance I leave you isn't in land or money or even in Augustus's genetics. It's in the possibility of change, in the power of working together, and in the courage to see things differently. Make it count." The letter brought tears to their eyes, but they were tears of joy and understanding. Their father's seemingly unfair division of inheritance had led them to create something far more valuable than what either could have inherited alone. As night fell over Millbrook Farm, the lights of the research center glowed softly, where scientists continued their work. In the fields, the next generation of sustainable crops grew strong. In the pens, Augustus's descendants carried on his legacy. And in the farmhouse, the Blackwood family celebrated not just their success, but the journey that had brought them together. Lucy's laughter echoed through the house as she played with her cousins, the future of Millbrook Farm secure in the next generation. The brothers shared a knowing look, understanding at last the full wisdom of their father's unconventional inheritance. Outside, Augustus rested in his special enclosure, surrounded by the farm he had helped create. The old pig's contentment seemed to reflect the success of Arthur Blackwood's vision, a vision that had transformed not just a farm or a family, but the future of British agriculture itself. The story of Millbrook Farm had become more than a tale of two brothers and an inherited pig. It was a testament to the power of seeing beyond appearances, of finding value in unexpected places, and of the extraordinary things that could happen when people chose to work together instead of against each other. As Oliver tucked Lucy into bed that night, she asked for her favorite story, the one about how a special pig helped two brothers learn to work together. Oliver smiled, knowing that the legacy of Augustus and Arthur Blackwood would live on, not just in the fields and farms of Britain, but in the hearts and minds of generations to come.